Rotarians and guests, this is the Rotary Club of Toronto, and I am Prince Kumar, your president, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our Rotary meeting for today. Next, we will have our recognition of the traditional lands and the invocation, followed by the Rotary Toast. For the Rotary Toast, please make sure you have a glass in hand. That goes for everyone virtually as well. Traditional lands. At this time, I would like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional lands of many Indigenous peoples who have walked and cared for this land for 15,000 years. They include the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Treaty Peoples of the Mississaugas of the Credit. The pathways to our Rotary dreams are paved with sacrifices and lined with determination. They're conquered with a willingness to face challenges, of taking chances, failing, and trying again. But when those pathways come to an end, we will find there is no greater joy than making our dreams come true by sharing Rotary with others. And now, for a special O Canada, please stand as it's played by our very own Dr. Brigitte Bogar and Glenn Davis. And remain standing for the Rotary Toast. And guests, a toast to Canada and to Rotary. Please be seated. It is now my pleasure to introduce our wonderful head table. I'm pleased to have the following people with us today. Alex Brown, Rotarian since 1984, 37 years, Alex. Former classification, laundry equipment, retired. Our Howie hobby speaker. And again, as I said, a very gracious person. At any time I've known him, whether it's on the board, whether it's in his actual farm, just an amazing, amazing individual. And for those who can attend this Sunday, you're gonna be really in for a treat if you're able to come in to Alex's place. Thank you, Alex, for joining us today. Our OP, Jason Phelps, Rotarian since 2003. Classification, executive search partner with the Phelps Group, our club president-elect. Now, I don't know if you're aware or not, but Jason and his team did a stellar job in getting our brand new accounting manager, which we're so very proud of. Thank you, Jason, for going above and beyond, not just as the president-elect, but at any time being there whenever support is needed. You're there just a phone call away. Thank you, Jay. Michael Morgan, Rotarian since 1971, 50 years, wow. Former classification, investments, real estate, club, past president. Now I remember when I was a new Rotarian, Michael was on our youth and children's committee, and it was really Michael and his talks about the various different communities and youth and children that inspired me to continue to do the stuff that we continue to do, whether it was the Youth Expo or the Youth Leadership Award. So thank you, Michael, for being an inspiration throughout. Paula Shepard, Rotarian since 2021. Classification, project management. Project manager for Rosary Group, member of our tech team. I have to give an extra special thanks to Paula. She joined in as a brand new member. She was in Barbados, and from Barbados, she used to help manage our virtual meetings. That is just phenomenal. Then she came back here. She was in quarantine for a couple of weeks. She continued to help manage while she was in quarantine. I'm so glad you're back here, Paula. And now you're out of the quarantine and you're continuing to do a fabulous job. Thank you so much, Paula. Dawn Marie King, Rotarian since 2014, classification, healthcare, clinical support services, senior director of the laboratory medicine and medical imaging with Unity Health Toronto, our club board liaison director for member engagement. Now you have to know our member engagement last year, for the first year, we were in a positive, I believe, I think we turned around the boat for probably over a decade. And a large part of that was Dawn Marie's stewardship and leadership and guiding us to get all the members, the new members on board. And she's continuing to do that now, apart from being a wonderful, wonderful advisor in so many other ways. Thank you, Dawn Marie. Oriana Theo, our impact reporter, the rapid response lead for Robin at Army Canada, who's going to be introduced shortly. Robert O'Brien, Rotarian since 1985, 36 years. Classification, law practice general, partner with Coots Crane, club past president, member of our program committee, host to our guest speaker. Now, as I understand, Coots Crane has been a very special partner to our club, giving our club over the years 5, I believe, if I'm correct, 5 presidents. And Robert, anytime you speak to him, he's got this wonderful legacy of Toronto, of our club, and how that history sort of unfolds. Thank you, Robert, for providing us that and for always providing us some amazing speakers. Rob Wright, Assistant Deputy Minister, our guest speaker, who will be introduced shortly. Rotarians and guests, our head table. Thank you, Maureen. Now, a message for our visiting Rotarians and guests, since I know there's quite a few I can see on the screen. To our visiting Rotarians, thank you for choosing our club for your makeup. We hope that you enjoy the meeting. To our guests, welcome to our virtual meeting. We invite you to sign up on the Join Us form on our website, rotarytoronto.com/join. And that is so that our Rotary ambassadors can contact you and have a conversation with you to see if this organization, Rotary Toronto, is the right organization for you to help make a difference in the community. Rotarians, please welcome our visitors in the tradition of our great club. Now, before we get started, I've got some announcements. Some of our meetings are recorded and may be posted on our social media. Please note that all videos and chats are being recorded for this meeting. For our virtual attendees, if you do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your camera. We ask that when you have a camera on, that you present a professional image, have your lunch earlier, please, and be aware of what's going on in your background. When your camera is on, we certainly won't be able to edit you out at a later point. I know our tech team is great, but you know, we've got our limitations. Just a reminder that you must please pre-register for October 1st Rotary Hybrid meeting at the National Club. And I want to let you know that not all of our meetings moving forward will have a physical component at the National Club. Some will be virtual meetings only, and our Executive Director, Carol, will give you advance notice of which ones are. If you haven't already done so, it will be necessary to have your 2-dose vaccination certificate on file. Email it to Carol, please, as it is necessary for us to show it to the National Club every time you attend a lunch. We will no longer be requiring COVID waivers to be signed. So you've got a little less to do to attend these lunches. Remember, you do not have to email them off to Carol. There's lots of signage at the National Club, and we thank National Club for that. But you must register for each lunch you wish to attend. Now, you will be pleased with this. As we're gradually opening back up, we are going to start allowing guests. However, they must also register with the office no later than Wednesday, please, of that week. And again, email Carol their two-dose certificate. So as of next week, you're okay to bring in guests as well. We're still going to continue with limited seating. It is on first come, first basis, but please go ahead and start to invite your guests for our hybrid meetings. Now, also note, if you're not providing your guests with one of your lunch tickets, they will be purchasing their own ticket at cost at $65. They must call the office no later than Wednesday to pay for their lunches in advance via credit card prior to being added to the registration list. If you're a Rotaract guest, you will have to follow the same process. However, the lunch cost is adjusted for our youth Rotaractors. Contact the Rotary office, please. Now, I've got a special announcement from one of our virtual participants. Maureen, over to you.
Hello, President Prince, and all our Rotary members and guests. We did mention earlier the Rotary Foundation Walk. The Rotary Foundation is the large fund that each year does over millions of dollars of donations to projects around the world. We do a walk each year. It's Sunday, September 25th. Prince and Anisandra will be there. So will the Browns. The morning walk is totally filled, so it's the afternoon only. Go to Trenton for lunch around 1 o'clock. You'll get the details when you register. And the Browns have very graciously invited you to join them for drinks after at their farm in Grafton that you saw. You must register in advance. It is the same COVID restrictions of your two-dose certificate when you arrive. And so you must be registered because they are limiting the numbers to the COVID limit of 100 people outside. That same link, Rotary7070.org, down the right-hand side, you can see how to donate if you are going, or even if you are not going. And that's the easiest way with a credit card through that link that's on the Rotary7070.org link. I'm not making it this year, but next year I hope to be there in person. Thank you, Prince.
Thank you, Maureen. And now, for another one of my favorite roles, is to welcome our impact reporting segment. So our impact reporting, remember, every week we bring up about a project or a charitable organization or a not-for-profit that our Rotary Club has donated to or supported over the last few months. And as a reminder to our committee chairs, continue to fill out your impact reporting form so that we keep a track of who to invite next. Today, we have Oriana Theo from the Robin Hood Army Canada as our impact reporter. Oriana graduated from the University of Toronto with a double major in History and Contemporary Asian Studies in the summer of 2020. During her time at U of T, she worked in event planning and coordination. After graduating, she worked for a financial technology company in their events department. She's currently applying for film programs. So Oriana has been part of Robin Hood Army Canada since February 2020, and the organization was thrilled to have us and help support Rotary's initiatives of rapid response as well. Oriana, over to you.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. So as Prince mentioned, my name's Oriana Theo, and today I'm here to speak to you about Robin Hood Army Canada. I'll also refer to it as RAC or RHAC. I'll give a bit of background about the organization, and then I will focus on one of RAC's initiatives, which the Rotary Club supported, which was the COVID-19 Rapid Response Initiative. So Robin Hood Army Canada was founded in 2018 by a group of 7 friends, including your very own president, Prince Kumar, to help serve the homeless community in Toronto by delivering surplus food and hygiene items to homeless shelters, with the larger goal of working towards ending homelessness in Canada. If I could have the next slide. Now, RAC has 11 teams in 11 cities across Southern Ontario, and we have made 1,595 deliveries of both food and hygiene items from either restaurants or private donors. We've served 44 shelters in the GTA, and some of these we've served over 200 times. The members of the Rotary Club have been instrumental in the work that RAC has done since its inception, including actually helping to create the organization. We've had 44 Rotarians volunteer with RAC over the years. So as I mentioned just now, one of the RAC initiatives, which the Rotary Club of Toronto was kind enough to support, was our COVID-19 Rapid Response Initiative. So when COVID-19 broke out, RAC was not able to make deliveries of food to shelters anymore. However, we still wanted to continue to support the shelters, especially because of the new challenges posed by the pandemic. So in partnership with the Rotary Club of Toronto, the COVID-19 Rapid Response Team was formed. The team was comprised of Prince Kumar, Laurie Brazier, Chialing Ku, Daniel Massicote, Stephen Smith, and myself. So we had weekly meetings during which I would present the most immediate needs of shelters we had relationships with. And then as a group, we discussed how we could meet these needs, either by purchasing items with donated funds or seeking out donations. It was really amazing working with your fellow Rotarians who were always so willing to help as much as possible, both through coordinating the purchase and delivery of these items, and also donating and delivering items themselves whenever possible and whenever it was safe to do so. We had an incredibly large impact and were able to help a lot of shelters. Thanks to the Rotary Club, who set up a link which people could use to donate, we raised $9,400, and this all went towards the Rapid Response Initiative. We were also able to make contactless and safe deliveries, and we delivered 6,639 meals and 6,294 hygiene items, all with an estimated value of $29,248. So an insanely large impact. If you could go to the next slide, Maureen, thank you. So the numbers, of course, speak for themselves, but here are some examples of so many thank you letters that we got from shelters. They were incredibly grateful for our support, especially because this was, as I said, an incredibly difficult time with new challenges. You can go to the next slide. There are some more examples of letters we got. So overall, it was an incredibly successful initiative with so many people being positively impacted. And really what contributed to the success was the strength of the partnership between RAC and the Rotary Club and the support which you offered. So we're incredibly grateful. Thank you so much. You can go to the final slide. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you, and I will turn it back to President Prince.
Thank you, Oriana. And thank you for your commitment to being the conduit between our club and the various different shelters that were supported. And also a special thanks to our club's rapid response team, which was really a sub-team of our community services committee, for their weekly meetings and weekly commitments throughout COVID for making this happen. What an impact this club has made. It is now time for our guest speaker introduction. And a reminder to our virtual audience, if you have any questions for our speaker, please email them to question@rotarytoronto.com, and I will select a handful during the Q&A time. For the folks that are here, of course, you don't have to email, simply raise your hand. That's one of the perks of being here in our hybrid meetings. Now, it is my pleasure to pass over the agenda to our host, past President Robert O'Brien. Over to you, Robert.
Well, thank you very much, President Prince. It's nice to be here at the National Club for this hybrid Rotary meeting. which provides the best of both worlds, where a limited number of Rotarians can get together live with the rest of the club on Teams. And at the same time, we can have a top quality speaker directly from Ottawa, as we do today. It's also great that when we've not been able to travel as much as we would like during COVID, and we've not had the opportunity to see what's really going on Parliament Hill in Ottawa. We have, of course, all lived through the 36-day election campaign just ended, but the little known story is what is really going on Parliament Hill and the major reconstruction project that is well underway and will continue to 2030, which is an important one. Our speaker today is the Assistant Deputy Minister responsible for the implementation and of the restoration and renovation of Canada's historical parliamentary precinct. He is overseeing this massive project as he has an important story to share with us. And he'll be able to tell us exactly where our newly elected members of Parliament will be sitting when Parliament resumes. I've been known to quote Winston Churchill, but he once said, "We shape our buildings, and thereafter they shape us." And Rob Wright is the key person who is reshaping our historical buildings in Canada and how they will shape us into the future. Rotarians and guests, please welcome Assistant Deputy Minister Rob Wright, live from Ottawa and Parliament Hill.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Robert. And so I'll move through this fairly quickly, hopefully allowing some time for questions and answers. So really, most of the presentation will focus on the restoration, modernization of the center block, the main Parliament building, which has now been fully launched. But I'll put that in the context, as Robert indicated, the broader work ongoing to restore and modernize the complete parliamentary precinct. So we can go to the next slide. So this gives you an overhead shot of the parliamentary precinct, looking overhead, obviously, from the north, looking south into the city core of Ottawa. So a couple elements to note that I'll come back to in the presentation. The first that will catch your eye is on the center block, there are 3 courtyards. Those courtyards allowed light to come into the interior offices, but they had no use beyond that. They were inaccessible. They were not used in any way. And so the project to restore and modernize the center block and to bring in a Parliament Welcome Center that I'll walk you through, these previously unused spaces move from backstage to center stage to help make this building work and to help make it more of a public building so that more Canadians can engage with Parliament and with its democratic processes. The other point to highlight on this image is if you look directly across from center block, there's an unfinished city block, what we call Block 2. The 3 city blocks facing Parliament Hill are lovingly called Block 1, Block 2, and Block 3. And Block 2 is directly across, and we're now moving to fully redevelop that entire city block to essentially finish off the parliamentary precinct with a 4th facade to move it to create essentially a quadrangle as we move forward. And I'll focus a bit on that during the presentation as well. So we can go to the next slide. So this just gives, again, a bit of the context of what is the parliamentary precinct. So you've got the classic Parliament Hill, the triad of the West Block, East Block, and Center Block. Of course, the Center Block is that main Parliament building with the chambers, the House Chamber and the Senate Chamber. You also have the Confederation, the Confed, and the Justice Building on the hill. Directly across are the 3 city blocks that were expropriated in 1973 for the future use of Parliament. And in Block 1, you find the Office of the Prime Minister and the Privy Council, Block 2 and 3 for the legislative functions. You can also see the Senate of Canada building, the original Union Station, the old train station within Ottawa, which was used for a time as a government conference center, is serving as the Senate of Canada building while the center block is undergoing its main restoration. So the Senate moved into the Senate of Canada building and the House moved into the West Block. And you can see in this image, the glass dome over the West Block. There was a courtyard infill and the House chamber is in that previous empty space in a courtyard. Move to the next slide. So this is the long-term vision and plan in action. So this is the long-term vision and plan is really the orchestral moves to be able to undertake all of this work. And a couple of things are really, I think, obvious here is that it's a complex sequence of projects that are all interrelated. It's like a series of dominoes. So one is dependent on the other. And you can see that the center block is the apex project in this complex sequence. So we are now at the point of the center block is fully under restoration now. You can see that in yellow. The other piece in yellow is block 2 that I referenced. So these are the 2 big elements that are underway right now. You can see the blue are the projects that have been completed. There's been a lot of work that has already been completed, and you can see the red. These are the next priorities as we move forward. So the Office of the Prime Minister and Privy Council in Block 1, and then the East Block and the Confederation Block, which the Block 2 will create the ability to empty those buildings. So again, you see that interdependencies playing out. And it's what we like to call essentially a 2 birds with 1 stone approach. We are restoring buildings that require significant investment because all of these buildings, and there's approximately 35, they're all range between 100 to 160 years old, and none of them had previously undergone major restoration work. So they all require significant restoration as well as modernization so that they can serve the needs of a modern parliamentary democracy as well as a modern Canada, from sustainability to universal accessibility. On the next slide. This is just a bit of a perspective of some of the completed projects that have been completed, or really over the past 10 to 15 years. If you look in the lower left-hand corner, really started with the Library of Parliament, which was completed in 2006. That's essentially when I joined the program. And then flowing from there, a broad range of projects that have been completed that have restored some of Canada's most important built heritage, modernized them for contemporary use, and enabled the center block to be emptied and restored. Next slide. So again, just a bit of a view of kind of where we're going as well. So as we move through the restoration and modernization process, we're really focused on building an integrated campus, not just a series of buildings in a landscape, but an integrated approach that works for Parliament and works for Canadians who are visiting Canada's parliamentary precinct, which includes Parliament Hill, but as well the 3 city blocks facing Parliament Hill. Go to the next slide. So we're currently updating the long-term vision and plan, and you can see some of the pillars and principles laid out here. And obviously supporting a modern parliament and all that means is critical, but it doesn't end there as well. The commitments go to leadership and sustainability, stewardship, engaging Canadians, and ensuring that there's a rich visitor experience for people who come to Parliament Hill. And we'll focus on that a bit as we move through. So this kind of brings everything that I've said kind of together. You can see the main buildings on the hill, the triad again of the West Block, East Block, and Center Block, Confed and Justice, as well as that transition zone to the city where what we call where Crown meets town, and those 3 city blocks. And then the emphasis on restoring the landscape and making sure that this is not just about buildings, but this is about the experience of how Parliament and the precinct sits within the natural setting of Ottawa and within the urban core. So we're currently undergoing a significant restoration of the escarpment, in the rugged escarpment in behind Parliament Hill. That's a very critical part. Working over time to have better connectivity between the hill and the river. Working with Indigenous partners to ensure that this space is more inclusive and is meaningful in all of the layers. And as we look at Parliament Hill, there's really 3 main layers in the history: the Indigenous layer, the military layer, and then the parliamentary layer, and working to bring all of those elements together and make them meaningful. Go to the next slide. So this brings Block 2 into context. Actually, I just stepped out from a international jury as we're looking at a competitive process to have a design approach for this complete block, which is a very complex design problem for architectural firms. So there, in this block, there's 11 buildings. 2 of them have a classified designation. 7 of them are recognized heritage buildings, and then 2 have no heritage designation. And then smack dab in the middle of this, and you can see what was the former U.S. Embassy, 100 Wellington, and 119 Sparks. In behind it sits the future Indigenous people space. So coming up with an integrated approach and filling in that 4th facade of Parliament with new developments in those empty spaces and making it work with an Indigenous people space, very complex program. And so we're in the process, down to the final deliberations actually this afternoon, on moving from a long list to a short list, from 12 architectural firms down to 6. And then in the spring, we will move to the final short list of 3 with a winner. And then this would move into the development. And some of the best firms internationally and in Canada have put themselves forward to respond to this problem and opportunity for the future of Canada. And this is really one of the main fingerprints that we'll be putting on the parliamentary precinct as we move forward. Next slide. So we'll shift directly into Center Block now. This is a bit of a recent overhead picture. You can see the construction on site, the excavation that is ongoing. We'll be removing over 40,000 truckloads of rock from in front of the Center Block to create this Parliament Welcome Center that I'll speak about. To date, we've removed a little over 20,000. Can move to the next slide. So again, just a little bit on the construction progress. You see the great care taken with the heritage elements. There's over 20,000 heritage elements in the Center Block, and there's a specific heritage conservation plan for each one of those assets. Some of them are being removed and restored off-site. As you can see in the upper right-hand corner, that's the hand-painted linen ceiling in the House of Commons chamber. And some of the elements, if you look to the upper left, that's the ceiling, and you can see the the chandeliers in the Senate chamber with a hand-painted suspended plaster ceiling, and that ceiling will be restored on site. The next. Again, a little more of the progress pictures on the construction. If you look at the lower right hand, so we're really stripping the building down to its studs. We've removed now over 10 million pounds of asbestos out of the building, anticipate removing over 20 million pounds. And it has to be deconstructed. All of the building systems, heating, cooling, electrical, plumbing, elevators have to be removed. All of the structure reinforced, brought up to modern seismic code, for example. The center block only met approximately 30% of the seismic code. So some significant technical challenges in making sure that this building is able to serve a modern parliament for the next century and beyond. So we'll now move into the design, and this will really be the last segment of the presentation. The key thing here is that we're able to modernize this building and create a new experience for a Canadian visiting Parliament Hill, and to accomplish all of that in a way that Parliament Hill remains familiar and remains as it was. So you can see this is the future center block looking from the Centennial Flame, and it looks very familiar. You can see that Vox wall return to its exact place, but you can start to see the hint of a new entry point into a Parliament Welcome Center, which will provide for the first time security screening to visitors to the Hill outside of the footprint of the building, which is a critical mandate of the project, but also for the first time providing the capacity to provide a visitor experience for people coming into the building, which you'll get a really good glimpse of this. So you're seeing a bit of I would say you're getting a sneak peek of many of the design elements, still working through the materiality and how everything comes together. So this will continue to evolve through the design process over the next year. Go to the next. The principles, though, remain the same. So it's really the Pearsonian principles, who was the architect of the modern center block. And really, it's a strong north-south axial plan. Presence of natural light coming into the building, which has been lost over time, and we'll be returning that, as well as common space, which enable parliamentarians to come together, and as well as the importance of this being a public building, and being able to make sure that it is carbon neutral and fully universally accessible. Next one. So maybe what we'll do right now is jump into the video to give you a bit of a sneak peek. So we're going to start the walk from the Centennial Flame, and really the image of Parliament Hill is familiar. The Great Lawn is returned to its full extent. The Vox wall, Vox is the same landscape architect who designed Central Park in New York. The Vox wall comes back to exact same place. But we have this elegant, quite simple entry on axis with the Centennial Flame and the Peace Tower. So let's move. So visitors to Parliament Hill will as they always did, make their way up the central pathway. You can see a real demarcation between the lawn and the central walkway, which doesn't really exist at this point. You see the same Vox central stairway, but now you start to see the ability to enter on the left or the right, the west or the east. You can see some plantings here, the typical Ottawa tulips. We're still working out the kind of the landscaping plan as well. If we pause right here, you can also see a new pathway, both from the west and the east, hugging the Vox wall. enabling visitors a new experience along that Vox wall and to be able to access the Parliament Welcome Centre, both on axis as well as from the sides. We continue. So entering in both from the west and the east. So you've got a choice architecture of how you come in now coming into a mezzanine level. And as you turn that, quite a large mezzanine, and then you're very transparent, you open and intuitive, you look out onto the Parliament Welcome Centre, and what you see and what grounds the whole space is the foundation to the Peace Tower and Confederation Hall. So that central foundation, the whole space is organized around that, and people flow around that as they move through the Parliament Welcome Centre. The ability to move from the mezzanine both to the west and the east, stairs and oversized elevators. Again, a universal accessible pathway is in the DNA of the project. As you make your way down to the main level of the Parliament Welcome Centre, you move through airport style security screening and still a very open and transparent approach. So that's a blast curtain, so that this is secure, but you don't lose the transparency and the openness and the intuitiveness of where you're going. And as you leave the secure zone, both to the west and the east, there's programming space. So there's exhibit space that the Library of Parliament will manage. There's a public theater. There's space for school classrooms. A big part of the visitor program is schools coming to engage with Parliament. And for the first time, spaces for parliamentarians to be able to engage with constituents, with different groups such as the Rotary Club or school groups. And you can see how people flow around the foundation of the Peace Tower. And I mentioned natural light being very important. So you get a first glimpse here. So this is the first of a set of two skylights in the Parliament Welcome Centre. And for the first time, you're able to see the Peace Tower from inside of the building. The Peace Tower is now only visible really from the exterior of the centre block. And this is repeated throughout the design of the Parliament Welcome Centre and the centre block, having sight lines to the Peace Tower. So bringing in natural light, which acts as a natural wayfinding device, making it feel much more in touch with nature, but also bringing the connectivity to the Peace Tower. That second skylight is adjacent to the Hall of Honor, so which is one of the central, most important spaces within the center block. So again, a focus on what are the while you're in an underground facility, very connected to the center block itself. Now, a public citizen, they would gain entry into this previously empty, unused, inaccessible courtyard, which now becomes a central transit vehicle for the building. It allows a number of things. One is that it allows a universal accessible pathway, avoids the kind of the tension and friction between the parliamentary usage and the public usage. It allows a very important covering these courtyards with the glass roofs, critical to the sustainability strategy and a carbon net neutral strategy. And it's a wonderful experience for a Canadian entering the space. You make your way off of the elevator. If you're on a public tour, you would exit to the right to the south hallway. If you're going to the chamber, to the gallery, you would go up the stairs or the universally accessible elevator. And again, as you come up on this mezzanine level, you'll see the sight line to the Peace Tower, again being a thematic that is maintained in the building, the beautiful stained glass of the House of Commons chamber. And as you look up, looking south, again, you can see the Peace Tower and the Canadian flag. You would then make your way through simple secondary screening, and then into, you can see a sound vestibule to ensure that activities that are happening within this courtyard do not disturb the proceedings of the chamber. So in through the sound vestibule, and then into the universally accessible gallery, which at this point has tremendous number of accessibility challenges. So the new gallery being accessible and inclusive for all. The House chamber, of course, this is an act of restoration, conservation of what was there before. Of course, making sure that it has all of that high-tech broadcasting capability and meets acoustic standards and lighting standards, modern standards, which will be technically challenging and all integrated into the heritage fabric. The last point I'll make, you'll see as you look at the floor of the chamber, in this image you can see 420 parliamentarians sitting. There's currently 338 members of parliament, but with the growth of the Canadian population, the number of MPs continue to increase. So this is but one illustration of how more MPs could fit within the chamber. We'll be undergoing more studies and mock-ups with parliamentarians to make those choices over time. So with that, that gives you a bit of a sneak preview of the work ongoing to restore and modernize Canada's parliamentary precinct, make it work for a modern parliament, but also to ensure that it is a place for all Canadians, and it is a place where all Canadians feel welcome and it is engaging, and that Canadians can engage with their parliamentary democracy and are proud of. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Prince, and open for any questions.
Thank you, Rob, and what a monumental, wonderful task you've taken on behalf of Canada and behalf of the government. Thank you for doing that. So I do see maybe two questions coming up. With the various elements that you have thought about in the renovation project, how have you incorporated our provinces and territories?
Yeah, it's a really important question. Of course, Center Block is kind of filled with iconic elements of representing the provinces and territories. It's one of the central thematics throughout the building. So it is an extremely strong theme. There are, of course, Nunavut did not exist. So there's some modernization of making sure that it is representative of the full Confederation. During Canada's 150th, we added Nunavut into the Centennial Flame. And throughout this project, we'll be making sure that those elements are really represented. But I think there's opportunities for engagement with the provinces and territories to ensure that they have an opportunity to have their voice at the table on opportunities to further reflect the modern sense of Canada's provinces and territories as we look forward. And I think that's one of the interesting challenges and opportunities and it's finding that this is all about balance. That's the key word on everything for this project, and respecting the past while looking forward as well, and finding a way to create bridges between the past to and towards the future.
Thank you, Rob. We do have a couple of questions. Bill, and if you can speak up.
Could you say more about the Indigenous space?
The question is if you can say more about the Indigenous space.
Yeah, it's so this was We had back in 2016, we had a public consultation on how to use the former American Embassy 100 Wellington. There was out of that public consultation, which we had over 7,000 Canadians respond, which is pretty good for that type of survey. And we had a short list of which an Indigenous space was one of the options. That was chosen, and so we've been working with the national Indigenous organizations, the Assembly of First Nations, the Métis National Council, and the ITK, as well as the local Algonquin Nation. To be quite frank, there have been a few challenges of getting that fully off the ground, getting on a common page between the Algonquin Nation and the national Indigenous organizations. We're continuing to have quite positive and constructive conversations as we're going through the Block 2 architectural design competition. We have a number of Indigenous members of the jury, and that is helping to drive forward conversation and thinking about how the Indigenous people space will fit in to Block 2. But in essence, the bottom line is the Indigenous people space will be the architectural vision and use vision will be determined by the Indigenous partners.
Thank you, Rob. John Portney.
What's the cost of this?
The question is, what is the cost of the entire project?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we had in mid-June of this year, we had a kind of a public announcement, technical brief of the Center Block and Parliament Welcome Center, and the cost estimate is $4.5 to $5 billion. So it's like there's no question. The costs are significant. There's no question about that. So the need to get it right and make sure that it serves Canadians and engage Canadians. And part of the reason why I'm here today is that this is Canada's house. And it's really important. We had a public engagement survey over the summer as well, just getting the results from that. So there's no question that the costs are significant, and it's being done for really for the long term, almost forever. The impact of what we do on these projects. The opportunities are great, but the responsibility is heavy as well, because it goes back, I think, to one of the Churchill quote about, shaping the buildings and then the buildings shaping us. And this is why the public component of these buildings are so important, because it must be public infrastructure.
Thank you, Rob. John.
Well, first off, I'm just really glad that you're doing this. I think it's really important. I have two questions. One, what will become of the temporary houses that are common to Senate? And two, will this move on? Will you touch 24 Sussex and official residents that they desperately need help?
So I'll be able to answer the first question easily. The second question, less easy for me. So what we've, with all of the spaces that we're investing in, because these investments are so insignificant, it's that two birds, one stone philosophy that I indicated. So they're always a double use to the investment. So they serve both a swing space use and a permanent. So they're all permanent investments. So the West Block, for example, that building was designed for both the short-term use while the Center Block's under restoration and the long-term use in mind. So there's going to be very little, there's really almost no transition between its short-term and long-term use. It serves as parliamentary offices, committee rooms, cafe, all of those functions. There will be no change, no investments. They'll just continue serving in those functions. The chamber is really the only element. So that was designed so that it would be easily convertible, could be densified with additional committee rooms if that is seen as a need. It could be kind of retained as a secondary chamber. And it could be opened up as essentially a bit of a general conference space for Parliament with very minimal investments to accomplish that. The Senate of Canada building, so that was previously the Government Conference Center. We again designed that so it would be usable for the Senate, but also it was designed so that it could revert back to being a government conference center without any investments, or it could easily serve a cultural institution need quite easily, any type of gallery space, etc. It's been kind of designed and constructed with that in mind. The question around official residences, so that mandate sits with the National Capital Commission, and I know that they're going through planning studies and deliberations on how best to move forward on that.
Thank you, Rob. And I've got one final one from our virtual audience. I believe you probably touched on pieces of this, but the question's around what are you anticipating the improvements and functionality of parliamentary, specifically parliamentary operations or usage?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we're trying to think in a holistic way. So again, not a building by building approach that it just makes sense on that and that, you know, kind of limited investment and almost in a kind of a fortress or castle type of approach, but thinking about the estate and thinking about how that works from a parliamentary perspective. So we're moving towards centralized material handling, layered security, the movement of people and vehicles. There's a new tram that is being planned. So integrating all of that. How do people move? How do material and goods move? How do vehicles move? And the connectivity between the buildings, as well as thinking about things such as sustainability, universal accessibility on a campus level. Also applying that to the public visitor experience. How does the visiting public engage the campus, and how do they, to make sure that it is intuitive from a wayfinding perspective, to make sure that there's the public amenities available for the experience, and to ensure that they're able to experience and engage with the parliamentary operations, to be able to get a not just visit the grounds, but to be able to have a real experience of going to the gallery and going to a question period, or finding out more about how Parliament operates and the history and traditions of Parliament in the Parliament Welcome Centre.
Well, thank you, Rob, and once again, I commend you for the mammoth task that you've taken on. I mean, you talked about being responsible for the 20,000 heritage elements or the 43,000 truckloads that have already gone in. So this is quite a project, and thank you again for enlightening us on some of its progress. Rob, a donation has been made in your honor to Water First, Canada's leading charitable organization working with First Nations communities to resolve local water challenges through education, training, and meaningful collaboration. Since 2009, Water First has partnered with over 40 Indigenous communities in Ontario, Quebec, and Labrador on a variety of education and training projects focusing on drinking and environmental water. This donation is made in partnership with the Rotary Club of Toronto's Indigenous Working Group. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Next week, Friday, October 1st, we'll be back at the National Club for one of our hybrid meetings. And a reminder to let Carol know if you are coming in by Wednesday, please make sure you have your 2-dose certificate on file, and you can invite guests. A reminder to invite guests as well for our in-person meetings. And of course, we'll need their 2-dose certificates as well. This will be a busy, busy lunch. We're expecting another busy one, so please register early. Our guest speaker is John Allen, former ambassador to Israel, and his topic will be values and interests in Canadian foreign policy, Saudi Arabia, China, Ukraine, and Israel. Thank you, everyone, for attending our meeting today. It is such a pleasure to see faces in person. I've had this pleasure. I know, John, in your year, you were sort of looking at the screen, and I've really had this pleasure of seeing, even though we're doing sort of 20 at a time and we're gradually moving that up to 30 and 40 attendees, it is so nice to see every single one of you. And I hope you're continuing to come back, and gradually we can bump up these numbers. Well, have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.